So a few weeks ago I saw Bugonia, and I analyzed the entire film, but more recently I saw Save the Green Planet, the original Korean film which Bugonia is officially based on, and I loved it. So I decided to do a brief comparative analysis between the two, where we could go through some of the original footage together and discuss some of the similarities and the differences in the storylines, the themes, the styles, and most importantly, the endings, while also offering a few new insights into Bugonia that I didn't necessarily cover in my original analysis. So to break these movies down, we'll discuss the following: the major plot points for each film, how Bugonia's character of Dawn was cast and adapted, comparing Teddy to Lee, comparing the styles of humor, the use of Chaperone, Green Day, and The Wizard of Oz in the soundtracks, whether Save the Green Planet's CEO is an alien, and the difference between each ending, and so much more. Hope you enjoy. So, the premise for the 2003 South Korean sci-fi comedy Save the Green Planet is just about the same as Bugonia. A conspiracy theorist named Lee kidnaps a pharmaceutical company CEO named Kang. And Lee strongly believes Kang is an Andromedan alien, and needs Kang to stop the Andromedan invasion on the day of the solar eclipse. But instead of using his cousin to help him, like Teddy does with Dawn in Bugonia, Lee teams up with his girlfriend, Suni. And this character, Suni, is a little different than Dawn. She'll do anything just to please Lee. Basically, she senses he doesn't love her as much as she loves him, and that's what drives her to help him even when she thinks what they're doing is really wrong. So Dawn in Bugonia and Suni in Save the Green Planet both represent this feeling of a conscience in their films, while they're often dismissed and cast aside by the more leading characters. And to add some context to how Bugonia's director Yorgos Lanthimos wanted to adapt a character like Suni into Dawn, he deliberately went out and sought out an actor that didn't ever act in a movie before. He wanted an untrained and, as he says, unfiltered presence, which really makes sense for what the character represents. Unlike Teddy and Michelle, Dawn isn't conditioned by conspiracy narratives or by a life of privilege. The character, just like the actor, is truly untrained. Yorgos also said he wanted someone specifically neurodivergent, someone who thinks in new ways and sees things from a different angle. It would further emphasize the frame of mind for that character, unique to the two main characters. So Aiden Delbus, who is autistic, fit that vision for Yorgos perfectly. And when it comes to the Teddy equivalent character in Save the Green Planet, Lee, he has just as tragic of a backstory as Teddy, and it's actually much more clearly shown to us. For Teddy, as you've seen in Bugonia, we get a few scenes with Casey implying sexual abuse and some obscure, dreamy flashbacks about his mother's coma and addiction. In Lee's case, the film tells us directly what happened to him through clear flashbacks, which include traumatic memories of discipline and bullying in school. A lover who became a victim of police brutality, dying in the midst of her protest. A deeply traumatized, abusive father who was killed out of self-defense. And a mother who, just like Teddy's mother in Bugonia, is in a coma because of a drug trial with Kang's pharmaceutical company. Save the Green Planet also has this added subplot that wasn't included in Bugonia, where there are a few detectives we follow working on the case of Kang's disappearance. There's this head detective who's leading his team, and he's competing with this retired detective who's also taken interest in the case. But on the head detective's team is this rookie detective who is secretly helping the retired detective because he idolizes that retired detective and he doesn't feel respected by that head detective who he works for. And it was actually really nice to see this addition because it added to the commentary of relationships in the workplace and unethical hierarchies, which is a major theme in both movies. Bugonia just decides to showcase it through Michelle's introduction at her company, which is really effective as well. And that detective element also digs into Lee's history a little more than Bugonia does with Teddy, showing he's become somewhat of a serial killer, leaving a trail of disappearances trying to find aliens and seeking revenge on those who have hurt him in his life. And to add to this, from a personality standpoint, this Lee character is way more unhinged and wild than Teddy in Bugonia. Teddy is way more calm and calculated, with the odd outburst every once in a while. And to compare the characters from a thematic standpoint, Teddy's character provides commentary on social inequity and corporate domination, largely through his dialogue, critiquing the structure of education, the pharmaceutical industry, the rapid destruction of the natural world, and the mistreatment of the everyday worker like him. As mentally unstable as he is, he can articulate his thoughts very calmly and clearly, especially with Michelle, who's even more calm and calculated to debate back and forth with to reveal these themes and commentary. Lee is more an in-your-face representation of what happens when all of these things like poor education, corporate ignorance, and abusive figures of authority all come down on a helpless individual and break him mentally. And rather than have that social commentary expressed through the character's dialogue, the commentary is expressed in what the character has now become, a monster. It's a similar approach to something like Todd Phillips' Joker of 2019, or more originally, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver of 1976. And to very fittingly add to this Joker comparison, Lee's methods of persuasion are way more brutal than Teddy's. He tortures the hell out of the CEO, Kang. I feel so bad for him. There's a crucifixion scene specifically that's pretty hard to watch. It honestly makes Teddy look like a pretty nice guy in comparison. But I don't want to make Save the Green Planet sound like a Saw or Hostel dramatic torture horror film. It's very much more overtly a comedy than Bugonia. The jokes are way more in the style of a traditional comedy. Goofy characters, gags, funny dream sequences, some pop culture parody. It also, being set in 2003, has many of those early 2000s-isms like the pop punk music, the fast motion camera sequences, and some pretty outdated special effects. But I wouldn't say it detracts from the film at all. It actually gives it a lot of charm, where it's never talking down to you while having such a virtuous message. Bugonia's humor, on the other hand, is simply that classic Yorgos Lanthimos approach where the jokes aren't direct jokes. It just takes place in a world where the absurdity is completely normal to them in that world. But when we watch it from the outside, we find it so bizarre and cleverly satirical of our real world that we laugh at everything that the characters say and do that they think is normal. And I'd actually say Bugonia is Yorgos' most realistic film yet. And on the topic of style, I think it's a good time to talk about the soundtracks here. So Bugonia's main songs are Chaperone's Good Luck Babe, Green Day's Basket Case, and Marlene Dietrich's Where Have All the Flowers Gone? The lyrics of Good Luck Babe deal with themes of suppressing one's true identity and feelings in a queer romantic relationship. These themes of suppressed identity tie in with Michelle Fuller's denial of both her identity as an alien and, more importantly, the destructive practices of her corporation. Green Day's Basket Case more directly describes a paranoid character who's losing their mind and beginning to feel they're unable to even trust themselves, which can pretty safely be applied to Teddy, who is deeply paranoid and lost in the world of conspiracy research and theory. And as I mentioned in my last video, Where Have All the Flowers Gone describes the cycle of destruction and regrowth, as well as humanity's routine self-destructive habits, which in the film applies to the destruction of our own planet and our own race as humans. And in Save the Green Planet, there's only one lyrical track the film uses, and that's Somewhere Over the Rainbow, performed by Judy Garland in the 1939 film Wizard of Oz. A song that represents the longing, hope, and belief that there's a better life somewhere out there in some different point in time or some different place. And of course, this ties in with Lee's longing desire to one day be seen as a rising hero, no longer a victim in a cold, desolate life of so much tragedy. So finally, let's talk about the major plot points leading into the ending as well as the ending itself. So, out of all the cops, the retired detective, Detective Chu, is the first to suspect Lee is the one who kidnapped Kang, so he visits Lee's house. And when Lee figures out that Detective Chu is onto him, Lee splashes him with honey and frees all his bees onto him, killing him as he falls down the hill. And later in the film, when Lee is about to further torture Kang by axing his leg off, Kang, very similarly to Michelle and Bugonia, convinces Lee a bottle of benzene in his car will cure his mom if he feeds it to her. And just as Teddy does in Bugonia, Lee believes Kang and accidentally kills his mother. So approaching the very end, when Lee is infuriated by what Kang has just told him to do, Kang, to save his own life, admits to being an alien. But we as an audience think he's lying, like we did in Bugonia. But unlike Bugonia, this time, we actually get flashbacks documenting everything that happened as Kang describes it. And it's a very similar story to the one Michel tells in Bugonia. His people came to Earth, they accidentally killed the dinosaurs with a deadly virus, so out of guilt they created the human race, but the humans kept destroying each other and trying to strengthen themselves with artificial chemical enhancements and evolution, and eventually evolved into the selfish, ignorant, wasteful creatures we are today. And this flashback footage kind of leans into both satirical comedy and tragic drama because it's kind of riffing on historical and biblical events and pop culture like Noah's Ark and 2001: A Space Odyssey. But it's also very honestly sharing real footage of some of the most tragic moments in history. The tone just gets darker and darker as these flashbacks get closer and closer to modern day. So after all this, when Lee has heard the entire story, Lee buys into the entire story, and Kang convinces Lee to take him to his company's factory where he can contact his alien prince. And in a super shocking series of moments at the factory, Kang suddenly activates a robotic arm that kills Sun-Yi. And right after, the police arrive, rescuing Kang and shooting and killing Lee. But in the very end, when Kang has now been rescued by the police, the alien ship descends to the skyline and shoots every policeman around Kang. The aliens appear and retrieve Kang, who is revealed to be their king. And now, on the ship, after discussing with his alien race, he deems the human race to be beyond saving, claiming that his company's drug trials didn't do the trick to evolve humanity into a more compassionate, loving race, just like Michel and Bugonia. So in the very final sequence of the film, a massive laser barrel is extended from the ship and it explodes the entire planet Earth with one shot. And that's the end of the movie. However, and I think this is really important, during the credits we see reminiscent footage of Lee's past when his life had hope, peace, and happiness to let us know it's the cold cruelty of our corporate-run society that turns some of humanity's most innocent creatures into something completely different. So yeah, when I compare these two films, they both really seem like they're getting to the same essential message. It's just that with Save the Green Planet, it seems more universal, and with Bugonia, it seems to have updated it to specifically fit the 2025 socio-political climate, focusing on issues like falsely progressive corporate policies and just straight phony PR, as well as these social media conspiracies that are being developed and the radicals on either side of the internet that just continue to be warring with one another that those two main characters symbolize. But overall, I love both movies and I think they both do a really good job of applying their own style to the same message, and I'm curious to hear what you think about either, whether you've seen them or not. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.